You are listening to a special edition of Outside the Boards podcast celebrating Oak Brook Polo Club's 100th anniversary. I'm Danny O'Leary. Founded in 1922 by legendary businessman Paul Butler, the Oak Brook Polo Club is an American polo treasure and one of the oldest polo clubs in the United States. It was once the sport's epicenter for elite professional polo and served as home to the U.S. Open Polo Championships for 24 straight seasons and other prestigious international and national polo tournaments. Paul's primary and enduring passion was horsemanship. In 1921, Paul and his father, Frank Osgood Butler, planted the first polo field and brought polo to Oak Brook. It was in 1927, standing on the international field at Meadowbrook Polo before the start of the Westchester Cup, Paul prophesied, "Someday all this will be gone and the center of polo will be Oak Brook." Paul's prophecy came true in 1953 after the Open Championship was played in Meadowbrook. The next year, the Open moved to Oak Brook, where it would be played until 1979, the longest consecutive time the Open has been played at one location. By 1956, Oak Brook Polo Club had 13 polo fields and stabling for 400 horses, with games played 6 days a week. The club also included grandstands, bleachers, and box seats, a clubhouse, and 36 miles of tree-lined trails. Paul joined 4 polo fields so they could be used as east-west and north-south airstrips for family and incoming guests. Those guests included royalty, dignitaries, and celebrities from His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince Charles, to Hollywood's Audrey Hepburn and Vivien Leigh, and countless others visited the club. Paul also initiated and hosted a long list of international polo matches that drew legendary players from around the world. The Oak Brook team also traveled far and wide to support other clubs, and Oak Brook hosted international teams representing nearly 30 countries. Polo provided the village of Oak Brook a lifestyle appeal, a social sporting scene amplified and carried on by his son Michael and daughter Jory. It helped lay claim that polo created Oak Brook. The Oak Brook Polo Club was the largest polo plant in the world from 1954 to 1979 and would be billed the polo capital of the United States, or Polo Town. In 2022, the Oak Brook Polo Club will be celebrating its 100th anniversary, but returning to its original and masterpiece field, the Cecil Smith Field. To honor this historical occasion, the Oak Brook Polo Club has invited club friends and family to share stories of their fondest memories of visiting and playing at Oak Brook. Join us as we take listeners down memory lane with some of the sport's household names while they share their experiences at Oak Brook and the impact the club and its founders have played on their lives. Saddle up. Welcome to this Outside the Board special podcast edition with me, Danny O'Leary. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our 4th episode of this special edition podcast of Outside the Boards, celebrating Oak Brook Polo Club's 100th anniversary. Before I introduce my next guest, did you know that Oak Brook Polo Club was a magnet for well-known international royalty, dignitaries, and celebrities? Over the years, the Oak Brook Polo Club visitors included His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, Prince Edward and Prince Charles, Lord Cowdray, Major Ronald Ferguson, Lord Patrick Beresford, Lord Tyrone Waterford, King Hussein, the Maharaja and the Maharani of Jaipur, Audrey Hepburn and Vivien Leigh, and others visited the club. A former polo player himself, Tommy Lee Jones, visited the Oak Brook Polo Club, and even Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones have been spotted at the Oak Brook Polo Club Saddle Club. My guest on today's podcast is Mike Dailey, who is a member of Michael Butler's Pool House Gang along with Joel Baker and Stuart McKenzie, if you remember from episode 2. Mike was born and raised in Hawaii. His father helped revive the sport of polo post-World War II in Waikiki. The later part of the 60s, Mike went to Culver Academies in Indiana. Mike's father, originally from Aurora, Illinois, was a member of the Black Horse Troupe alongside Paul Butler, which was his exposure to the sport and where he got started. Mike watched polo at Oak Brook as a kid when his father was a USPA board member. Mike grew up playing in Hawaii and got his big polo break when Michael asked him to play on his team in England in the early 70s. Butler and Dailey would become great friends, traveling and playing together. Mike is a great friend of the Oak Brook Polo Club and Butler family and close friend to Michael Butler. We are thrilled to have him on this special podcast. Enjoy. Mike Dailey, wonderful to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Heard so much things about you. You're highly recommended for having me get the chance to have you on this interview, as you have, I'm sure, a lot to tell about your days at Oak Brook.
Well, I probably have a lot to tell and probably have a lot not to tell. So,
Well, for the purpose of this podcast, we're going to kind of keep it PJ-13.
okay. That cuts it about in half. Okay.
If you got a juicy story to tell, I'm sure we're all ears. I've gotten some good ones. I've had the pleasure of interviewing Ronnie Tong.
Ronnie would keep it G. He's good.
Joel Baker had a good story from a polo ball and stealing trophies.
Oh, yeah.
And getting in trouble with Jory.
We did that a few times. Oh.
So nonetheless, it's already been quite entertaining. But for those who are listening in here, who is Mike Dailey and what is your association with the sport of polo?
Born and raised in Hawaii. I was born in the territory of Hawaii before it was a state. And my family was very involved with polo over here. My dad had helped revive the sport in Waikiki in the post-war era in the 50s, and then moved it out to Mokalia in the North Shore and opened the Mokalia Polo Club, which then became the Hawaii Polo Club in the mid-60s. So I grew up with polo and playing polo. And in the latter part of the 60s, I went to high school at Culver Military and played up there.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's family was originally from the Aurora area. And he had been in the Black Horse Troop with Paul Butler in the 1920s when it was in Chicago. It was part of the National Guard.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he got exposed to polo. So with that said, I remember going as a kid to Oak Brook to watch the high goal tournaments, the Opens and that in the mid 60s with my folks, because Dad was on the USPA board or whatever it was at the time, and watching all the greats play up there, the Berries and Ronnie and some great polo of the old style pre-Argentine invasion.
It sounds like, though, that your family actually goes back a little further with it going back into the 1920s.
Well, yeah, that was when Dad met Paul. I don't know if Paul probably remembered him because Paul was the head of the troop. Dad was just a foot soldier down there filling in for some of the officers when they were too hungover to play because he grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
So, polo background. Yeah.
There's a great photo of Paul Butler leading the Black Horse Troop.
Yes.
I
have that photo. Yeah. That's a wonderful photo. I love that. Right.
Is your father in that photo? Is one of the men?
He might be. Yeah. If it's in the late 20s, he was in Chicago from when he was about 16. So from 1924 up until about when the Depression hit, then he left and moved down to Florida. So, and got the hell out of Dodge, as they say.
That's incredible. So I'm assuming your dad probably then had some time playing at the Chicago Avenue Armory.
I think he was maybe pre-Armory. I don't know. I can't ask him because he's been dead for about 25 years. But I don't know what kind of polo they were playing back in the 20s, whether it was arena or outdoor or what they were doing.
And it must have been a combination of both because I know the Chicago Avenue Armory, where Paul Butler had formed a Black Horse Troop polo team, operated out of there, which was right in the city.
I remember the Armory because that's where a lot of my pals like Donnie Healy and Danny would play. But I never played there. I never got to the Armory. The Armory was shut down by the time I was actively playing up at Oak Brook. So
yeah, and it's no longer there. I mean, it's now the Contemporary Art Museum.
Right.
Teared it down since then.
Oh, yeah. cities do change, don't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, no, that's great, man.
When I was first going out to Oak Brook, guys were landing their airplanes on the bare fields. There was 10 or 12 fields and lots of polo.
Yeah. So did you get your start then here in Oak Brook?
No. I started playing here in Hawaii, grew up playing in Hawaii. And then Michael Butler, he and Ronnie came and visited my dad one summer. I think it was like when I was graduating from Culver. And then Michael invited me to come play for him in England.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and played 2 seasons for his Warfield team in 1972 and 1973.
Mm-hmm.
And then we became very close friends, and I started playing for Oak Brook on a more frequent basis.
So I would assume then you're kind of going back and forth from Hawaii to Oak Brook.
Yeah, I played with him there, and then we went down to Florida and played for a few months with Stuart McKenzie and Eduardo Moore and Michael and I. And Yeah, they had bought a bunch of horses from Eddie and brought them up. So we played that in Florida when they first opened the Palm Beach Club, when Wellington first opened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, that's some good stuff. So, got any good stories for us from your days in Oak Brook? You're in the 70s, so it seems as though your paths would have crossed with Joel Baker.
Well, yeah, I mean, Joel and I played together in Santa Barbara. So we were on teams together in Santa Barbara. And then we played, there was a season that we both came up and played for Oak Brook, I think along with Stuart and Michael. And I think that was the year that they were still doing the East-West tournaments, trying to pick the top up-and-coming players from east of the Mississippi, playing against the ones from the West. And I was playing in that match and got T-boned by two horses and was in a coma for 3 or 4 days.
Oh my God.
Yeah, kind of cut that season short for me.
Yeah.
That would have been 1975.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, were you part of the crew with Stuart and Joel Baker in the pool house?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I feel like there's some trouble there. Now I got to get Stuart on for this podcast.
Stuart will deny it. He will deny it and say it was me, but he's the one that took Michael's exercise bike and put it in the lake. Stuart's a bigger, stronger guy than I am. So he was the one that was capable of doing that. So.
Now, how old were you during those days?
Well, let's see. 75, I was 22.
Okay.
I was in my early 20s.
Now, you guys were all in your 20s, I think, at that point. I think Joel said he was around 24.
Yeah, Joel's about 3 years older than I am, and Stuart's about 4.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, those guys were probably in their mid-20s, and I was a few years younger.
Now, how many seasons did you spend up here?
Not that many. Maybe 3.
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 at different times. And then sometimes I would just come in for a few weeks during the Open and check in with everybody and make sure that they were misbehaving properly. But it was the early 80s. Michael asked me to come up and manage the club for him and play for the team. I think that was 84. Yeah, it would have been the summer of 84.
Did you know a Barb Rosner? Does that name ring a bell?
I could have, but it's not jumping out at me.
I think she was helped manage the club. I want to say in the 80s, around that time. It obviously seems like the Dailey and Butler family go way back. It seems like you got a lot of great history together.
Oh, yeah. We've had a lot of fun. And Michael and I talk about once a week or so. I've been trying to help him get his memoirs published, but there's some editing that needs to go in there.
So in the 3 or 4 years you've been here, you're hanging at the pool house, is there a story that really sticks out in your mind?
Well, this is probably low key at this point in time. But when Stuart and I were together, we were always getting into mischief. Yeah, his wife just passed away last year, so we've been staying pretty close. But there was the food fight in Michael's dining room. I don't know how the cake ended up on one of the old masters, but it did. He was not very happy about that one. But one of the more printable, Michael liked his pot products, and he had a great cook housekeeper. Mm-hmm. And she made these brownies, but we didn't really know what they were. And they were really sweet and really good. And it was a major USPA event at Michael's house with all the big sponsors and all the major patrons from Texas. And, I think this was in the 80s. So I'm in the kitchen and nibbling away. And all of a sudden I'm going like, whoa, things are getting a little lightheaded. And out and trying to talk to some of the big Texas sponsors and patrons and trying to carry on a conversation like that. And things is getting very difficult. So I just went down the hill to the stables and hung out with the horses.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, so you traveled overseas with Michael, right?
Oh, yeah. I played for him for 2 seasons in England. And then, of course, we took trips down to Ireland from there. We loaded up the horses in the trucks and trailers and put them on the ferry and went down to play against the Marquess of Waterford, Tyrone, who played a number of times at Oak Brook. It was a very, very colorful character and a lot of fun. And we would go down and stay at his castle, and he would put on a match down there. And, of course, they would put us all in separate And this castle goes back to the 12th century, right? 13th century. So we're all in these little rooms and these long stone hallways. Of course, in the middle of the night, you hear these little doors opening and closing, people moving around to rooms. And well, I guess it was the ghosts.
You very well could be right. And this was in Ireland?
In Ireland, yeah. And then we played in Phoenix Park there for the Irish Gold Cup. And the first year we played for it, my dad came and played with us. So Michael and I and Tony Devich.
Okay, yeah.
When we won it. And we took it back to the hotel, and it was scared the hell out of Tyrone because we took it up to our rooms and said, well, in the Hawaiian tradition, you always take the trophy home.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is this big, beautiful silver trophy the size of a table, right? And he's panicking. Well, this is a national treasure. You can't be taking that home.
That's what the little hand-me-out trophies are for. Yeah.
At the end of the day, we had to give it back to him. But we did have some fun pulling Tyrone's chain for a couple of days.
Now, was this the same team that you played in Ireland that came over to Oak Brook to play in the Irish Cup? It seemed to be a regular matchup.
No. I mean, Tyrone would bring a team to play in the Irish Cup. Yeah.
Okay.
He would bring a group from Ireland. Usually himself and his brother, Patrick Beresford, were great fans and friends of Oak Brook and Hawaii because they used to come to Hawaii and play every year. Tyrone and my dad had an ongoing Hawaii-Ireland tournament that used to kick off the season here for about 20 years.
Are either of those families in Ireland still playing?
Yeah, they are. Tyrone's two sons, who are maybe 10 years younger than I am, or not quite, but one of them, I think, played in England as a pro and got to 4 or 5 goals. And the other one, I think, got to 7, and he played internationally. He married a Chilean, and they have property in Argentina. They go back, and so he spends a lot of time down there. But the older son is still in Ireland running the estate, Curramore, and raising polo ponies. My son went and played for him for one summer to help him with training the young horses.
Okay.
Tyrone passed away, and Patrick passed away, and everybody's passing away. I guess I'm next.
Don't say that. We would love to bring back the Irish Cup. I mean, that's something that...
It's so much fun. But I'm sure I can reach out to him. I just haven't talked to him in a decade or more. We all kind of lost track there a little bit. And then we took a team to Jamaica to play. I think it was the 100th anniversary of the Jamaican Polo Association, or Polo in Jamaica. Michael set it up so that we were going to represent the USPA as the U.S. team and went to go play in Jamaica. And that was very, very interesting. A group, an interesting trip. Donna Healy and I and Tommy Harris and Adam was the actual team. Michael was just an alternate on that one. He didn't want to play. So the 4 of us were there. And of course, the fellow that ran Michael's horse operation,
James Rice.
Yeah. And James came with us as quote unquote coach. It was a good crowd out there in Jamaica.
Jamaica's relationship is still deep.
Yeah. So that's always a strong Oak Brook back and forth. And that's kind of really where that got started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have the Jamaica team. They're actually up here now for the Butler International Cup, which we've transformed into an actual international tournament.
Good.
And they actually made it to the finals. Charlie Chambers, who came up with his team, I don't know if that name rings a bell.
We're talking a long time ago.
Melvilles, I don't know if their father played.
Right.
Obviously, the Waits family that's there. But yeah, there's great relations with them. They're a fantastic group of people. And we were actually down there, I want to say 2 seasons ago. The Oak Brook Polo team went down there with Todd Rackley, Chris Fangle, Horacio Anato, myself.
Oh, geez.
Represent Oak Brook, and we had a good time. That's for sure.
I bet you guys did. So they pick us up at our hotel and they take us out for a scrimmage and a practice to try the horses. And this is maybe 1980. And, Jamaica had been under a lot of restrictions that they weren't letting stuff being imported. So horses were an issue. They didn't really have much in the horses. And so they'd pick them up wherever they could. So a lot of the horses didn't have much in the way of brakes or handle. You were just going for it, right? So we're in the little bus on the way out. And the Jamaicans think that, hey, we're going to get you going Jamaican style. So they start rolling these big fat joints and passing them routes. Everybody's very stoned by the time they get there. I don't know about you, but I mean, I can't hit a polo ball when I'm stoned. and neither could Donnie. So Donnie and I are out there. Tommy Harris, on the other hand, it just made him all the more effective. He didn't need a horse that could stop, and he didn't need to see.
My gosh.
He was out there just hitting the ball out of the air, charging, roaring around. And, Donnie and I looking at each other going like, I think the ball went over there. Did you see it? Yeah, we probably should go after it.
Oh, man. I'll have to probably put a disclaimer on this podcast. This just for everyone. You guys were all young. I mean, come on. I mean, look at the group that you're going down there with, and it's Jamaica.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So it's inevitable. The Oak Brook Polo Club is thrilled to announce the creation of the Friends of Oak Brook Polo. The club's not-for-profit arm created with the mission of supporting quality recreational and competitive polo in Oak Brook through the rejuvenation and sustainability of polo activities. This will ensure the long-term health of the polo club so that it continues to thrive and host safe and competitive polo for future generations. The goal of the organization will be to raise and invest funds for maintaining and improving Oak Brook Polo Club's fields so that it remains a healthy, safe, and competitive venue for the sport of polo and for the development of recreational polo programs to help advance the sport in the area. To learn more or to donate, please visit www.oakbrookpoloclub.com for more information or contact us directly at info@oakbrookpoloclub.com. Thank you in advance for your support in helping to preserve the club's history and importance in the global polo community.
As I said, the horses were kind of questionable. I mean, especially if you liked horses with brakes. So for Tommy, it didn't matter. He's like, hey, I don't need horses that stop. I'm used to riding horses that run ways. But we're kind of a little maybe pickier. And this young kid comes up to me, this young Jamaican kid, and goes, hey, man, you want to borrow my horse, man? He's a nice horse. And it's a big Appaloosa, about 15.3, big round butt. And, I got on it, and it had a nice mouth. And neck rein stopped, and it turned. And I said, well, yeah, thank you. I'd love to play this horse. So we're out there, and we're on Sunday, and the match is going on. And I'm on defense, and I go back, and I lean way back to take a tail shot on this horse because he's got a big butt, right? Well, the next thing I know, I'm doing 3 flips in the air, and I land on my back. The horse had never had a tail shot before.
Uh-huh.
So after the game, the kid comes up to me and goes, hey, man, sorry, man, horse never have tail shot. I said, yeah, I think I figured that out.
Did just pushing a tail shot just spook the horse or just made it stop?
Well, I mean, when it felt that mallet behind its butt, it's put its head between its legs and its butt in the air and launched me.
Oh, my gosh. That's scary. Just get a complete roll.
Somebody said, you did about 2 flips in the air and then you landed on your back. Luckily, young and could bounce, but I had a black and blue welt around my back for a month.
Now, you played also in England with them too, right?
Yeah, we played 2 seasons. I played for Warfield. That was outstanding. Michael had quite the scene there. He was in the heyday of hair. And as always, he knew all the rock and roll guys and had this Georgian manor out in the countryside outside of Windsor. We had a little practice field and stables and had a long dining room that could seat about 20, 30 people. And you never knew who was going to show up. You'd walk in and there's George Harrison, there's Mick Jagger, there's the Mamas and the Papas. It's just an ongoing potpourri of interesting people.
Absolutely.
And they had a string of old cars, old classic Benzes and Rollses. And so on Sunday to go to the match, there would be a caravan of about 6 cars, right? Mm-hmm. And the cars would pull up to the field and the tribe would get out and lay out the blankets with the cushions and everything like that for spectating. It was the tribe.
Yeah.
Honored to be a part of it.
Absolutely. I'll say, my gosh, I got to get a hand on some of these pictures.
Yeah.
Were you starstruck in any sort of way?
I didn't know. I was 19 years old, just out of my freshman year of college, going like, whoa, this is different.
Yeah, I'll say. So did you travel? I mean, when I talked to Dr. Richard Khalil and Joel Baker, it sounded as though they traveled quite a bit representing Oak Brook in the U.S., overseas, and other countries. Did you do the same? I mean, obviously you had Jamaica, Ireland, England. Were there any others?
I'm trying to remember. Well, we went to Florida, Santa Barbara, because I was living in Santa Barbara for most of the 70s. I was in university there and then ranching in San Ynez and playing at the Santa Barbara Polo Club. So that was pretty much my base in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. In the time that you spent with Oak Brook and with Michael Butler, what does Oak Brook Polo mean to you, whether it be part of your polo career or social?
Oh, it means a lot of things. Oak Brook was the center of the polo universe in the 60s, when I was growing up in polo. So it was like, wow, see all those fields and the polo center and I can't remember the name of the restaurant bar that was right there at the polo field.
The Saddle Club?
Yeah, the Saddle Club and all that. It was just such an epicenter and all the great players of that era. And then on a personal basis, it was a key part of my life at that time. And I was having such a good time. Never a shortage of lovely, attractive ladies around and a lot of fun to be had with a lot of great players and good friends. I have wonderful memories of Natoma and the Polo Club and the time there and teeping Jory's house and all sorts of fun things like that. Joel and Stuart and I was borrowing the trophies, hiding the trophies from the polo ball. And then we had a lot of fun with Jory. We used to tease her. But Michael was so relaxed and Jory was always so organized, right? She was the dragon lady. She was like, okay, everything got done. So
yes.
She has a wonderful sense of humor and I love her dearly. So we'd have some fun pulling her chain and Jeffrey, her husband at the time.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel Oak Brook Polo still has a very special and important role in the greater polo community today?
That's hard to say, Daniel. I mean, things change. The polo center of gravity has moved. I'm so glad that you guys have kept at least the one field there to try and keep some of the tradition alive. But it's not a polo center anymore. You need mass. You need all the giant polo setups that are like down in Florida and like that. You need a dozen fields and barns and all of that. It's a wonderful piece of polo history. And it's great that you guys keep it going because Chicago doesn't have much else besides that. So keeps Chicago's hat in the polo ring.
Yeah, and outside of Oak Brook, Chicago polo community is growing, which is exciting.
That's great. But, it's real estate, right? The real estate just got too expensive in Oak Brook, right?
Yeah, it is.
And that's the history of polo everywhere. So
yeah. So we technically have 3 fields. We have the Prince of Wales Field, which essentially has become a floodplain, which is why we're moving back to the Cecil Smith Field.
Yeah.
Which we haven't been on for 12 years. So that's really exciting.
Okay.
And, the soccer fields, which are primarily soccer, which is by the Oak Brook Library, which was built, which I know where used to be like stick and ball fields, are still around, but we don't play polo on them.
Okay.
And, there's one barn that's probably about a half mile away, the Oak Brook Stables, but a lot of the activity comes far west. So Yorkville,
Right. When I was there in the 80s, that's when the whole polo scene was springing up in Naperville.
Yep. Yeah.
Naperville was taking off at that point.
People are very surprised. I come from mainstream sports, so when I talk about polo to them, they're so astonished and impressed that there's this deep history that they seem to never know about was actually there.
Yeah.
And you take them down this path with them, and it's just like, look, if you want to compare us to other sports within Chicago, we're the 4th oldest sports organization. Oak Brook was founded a year after, I think, the Chicago Bears.
Yeah. Remember, it needs to be said that for a big chunk of time, for decades, Oak Brook, a.k.a. Chicago, was the epicenter of polo in the United States.
Yeah.
And at that point, the United States was the epicenter of polo, right? I mean, I guess Argentina still had Argentina, but they weren't going around the world at that point. They hadn't started exporting their brand. And that exporting the Argentine brand started at Oak Brook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really exciting. I mean, what better time than our 100th anniversary to go back to our old field? That big giant oak tree is no longer there, which surprisingly disappointed a few people.
What happened to it? Did it die?
It died, but it's still beautiful up there when you go, much more beautiful than where we were.
Yeah. Oh, no, the Cecil Smith Field was always one of the best fields and was one of the few fields that if it was raining, I mean, it might actually be playable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still graded. I mean, even though it has been played on for 12 years, when we invited the maintenance people up there, like, oh, this was clearly designed as a field of some sort. Looking at topography reports and everything. Butler National has been fantastic to work with. Obviously we share the same ancestry as that golf club.
Yeah.
So they've welcomed us back with open arms, which has been fantastic.
Well, it's good for their brand. Yeah, they're smart, and I think those guys probably are. They go like, hey, having some polo tied into our golf and our tennis, this is the original Oak Brook brand.
Yeah.
I mean, equestrian was a part of it. Yeah.
So it's exciting stuff. But nonetheless, I hope to see you out here, Mike. I really do. I hope you'll find your way out here for our 100th anniversary. A lot of things are being planned and in the works.
What is the date of that?
So our season will start at the end of June 25th and will go to the end of September. And I think we do plan on bringing back a polo ball of some kind towards the end of the season. So that will be around the time with the Friends of Conservation, obviously ran by Roydy.
Right.
So the whole family, I'm pretty sure, will be around to come back during that time. So we plan to have a big celebration around that.
Yeah.
And with the Butler International Cup and a lot of the anticipated international teams coming, it'll be a big deal. That's for sure. Especially some of the international teams.
That'll be in September?
September. Yeah.
Yeah.
I suspect in September. Yeah. Right now, I'm primarily focusing on getting that field prepped and ready. They took off target greens on there, so we got to seed, sand, aerate, and get that field going. Hopefully, we'll have a nice mild winter and early spring. Let everything get taken root, and we'll be back up there, no doubt about it. But it's exciting. Mike, I really appreciate you taking the time. I really do. Thanks for sharing some of your stories with us. And
well, probably most of them that I share with you, well, we can't use this one. Shouldn't use that one. We probably don't want to use this one.
Nonetheless, it's great.
That was the era that I was there. So
You're a young guy. You're in your late teens, early 20s. If it was me, I'd probably be having a blast just the same.
Yeah.
So there's no question about it. And I really appreciate you sharing it with us. We hope to see you up this season. We really do, once we start announcing these things. And I got one last question for someone to maybe provide some background. Because so far, Richard Khalil and Joel Baker weren't able to provide too much context. But how did the whole bear thing come about? Are you nicknamed a bear?
Yeah, I'm Baby Bear.
You're Baby Bear. Okay. How did this exclusive club come about?
Well, the first year I was in England playing for Michael there. We struck up a very close friendship, and there was a group of us, and there was a gentleman by the name of Robert Peischer, who was not a polo guy, but he worked with Michael in the theater. And he lived out there with us. And Michael's significant other at that time was a beautiful lady by the name of Boo Brassey. And Michael had a fondness for little bear statuary. So we started to tease him about it, and it kind of stuck. So he became the bear. And then Boo became Boo Bear. And Robert became Bobby Bear, and I was the young kid on the block, so I became Baby Bear. It was just kind of a fun and a giggle at the time, and then it got a life of its own.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I know, we've got Stuart, and he's Polo Bear, and Manuel is Chili Bear. And,
I love it. That is fantastic, man. Thank you for sharing that. We were all kind of like wondering, like, where did this kind of come about? So
it was fun little random things that just stuck, and then it just kept growing. And the next thing I know, these guys are going down and getting these bear claw tattoos on their arms, right? And Stuart and I are going like, well, we're from the Pacific, and Pacific bears don't do tattoos. Stuart and I are not tattooed.
well, thank you so much, Mike, for sharing that with me. That's great. Now we just need Mike to confirm your story. That's all. But it's fun how things like that kind of stick and just kind of blossom like that. That's a lot of fun. But thanks again, Mike, for taking the time with me, sharing your stories. It's great. Like I said, hopefully we see you up here this next season in 2022.
Yeah, keep me in the loop as to what's going on and what the events are scheduled in for September, because September might work. I spend a lot of time up in Cody. We have a hotel there in Wyoming.
Mm-hmm.
So go back and forth there, and that's kind of a hop, skip, and a jump from Cody to Chicago.
I might have to follow up on you with that because I would love to go to Wyoming. Excellent. Well, again, Mike, thank you so much.
Daniel, thanks for the trip down memory lane. I enjoyed it.
No, not a problem. Have a wonderful holiday.
And you too. Bye-bye.
The Oak Brook Polo Club is thrilled to announce the creation of the Friends of Oak Brook Polo. The club's non-for-profit arm created with the mission of supporting quality recreational and competitive polo in Oak Brook through the rejuvenation and sustainability of polo activities. This will ensure the long-term health of the polo club so that it continues to thrive and host safe and competitive polo for future generations. The goal of the organization will be to raise and invest funds for maintaining and improving Oak Brook Polo Club's fields so that it remains a healthy, safe, and competitive venue for the sport of polo and for the development of recreational polo programs to help advance the sport in the area. To learn more or to donate, please visit www.oakbrookpoloclub.com for more information or contact us directly at info@oakbrookpoloclub.com. Thank you in advance for your support and helping to preserve the club's history and importance in the global polo community. That was a great episode. We hope you had fun listening and learning about Oak Brook Polo Club's unique and storied history. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to listen to others as we continue to celebrate this historic season. Thanks for stopping by, my friends, and hope to see you at Oak Brook this summer.